Okay, so good afternoon everybody. Welcome to another live stream where I'm going to be explaining another English language topic, and today we are going to be focusing on articles. Now, articles are, of course, as I'm sure all of you know, a very challenging area of the English language, and especially, of course, for Ukrainian speakers, because in Ukrainian articles just don't really exist in the same way as we have them in the English language. So it's going to be quite a difficult area of language, but I hope that as we go through this, I will be able to provide you with some understanding, with some help as to how articles work, and in addition trying to ensure that we learn something new about the usage of articles. Now, the most important thing for today is not just helping you to learn something new, but we are also here to raise money for the rehabilitation of Ukrainian soldiers. So if you find what I do interesting, if you learn something new, the first QR code, саме перше, там написано ще ходиш, there is the QR code will take you to the banker from Твоє майбутнє. If you are watching this on a phone or you can't scan, then there is also a link in the description as well. There is also, we have posłanie na banku tam. So let's make a start. So the way that this is going to work is we are going to be, I will be explaining some theory to you. I'll be going through all of the main points. Unfortunately, with articles, there is a lot of theory. There's a lot of things that I need to explain. It's not an easy topic in the English language. But I hope that as we go through this, I'll be able to explain some different points for you, and there will also be a few tasks for you to try as well as we have a look through this. And for some reason at the moment chat doesn't seem to be working, but I will still continue. For some reason we've got live chat is currently unavailable, but we'll keep going and hopefully it will sort itself out. So the first bit of information that we're going to look at here is about definite and indefinite articles and some basic ideas about how articles work. So the first rule that we're going to look at is a very basic idea, and it is the idea that when we do not say which thing or which person we mean, exactly which one we want to talk about, then we use the words a or an, but with singular countable nouns only. If a noun is plural or uncountable, we don't usually use the article a or an. It's usually only for singular countable nouns. And we have two examples of sentences here. Is there a supermarket near here? And also, he's a doctor. So here we have got two examples for here using the articles a and an with the singular countable noun. A very important difference to consider here is the difference between a and an. Because this is often misunderstood, the difference between these. At lower levels, you are often taught that we use the article a and an, or we use the article a if the word starts with a consonant sound, as a consonant letter I should say, and we use an if it starts with a vowel letter. Now, this is actually not true. There we go, chat working now, it's better. What's actually important is the sound that comes next. So if we have, for example, an umbrella, umbrella starts with the sound is a vowel sound, so we use an. But if we have the word uniform, uniform starts with a consonant sound. It starts with the sound y. Y is a consonant, and so we say a uniform. Now, of course, usually vowels usually make vowel sounds and consonants usually make consonant sounds, but it's not always true. And what you need to think about is the sound that the word makes, and that helps you to decide if it should be a or an. It's like in Ukrainian, I guess, when you have to choose, when you're saying with in Ukrainian, with z, z, is, it all depends on the sounds that come around it, and it's the same here. It all depends on the sound of what comes next. Moving forward to the article the, we usually use the article the when we want to talk about something specific that we know about, or something which is unique. There's only one of them. There are many, many more rules which we will have a look at a bit later, but this is the fundamental idea. Something specific which we know, or something which is unique. As we talked about before, a and an we can use with singular countable nouns, and in principle that's it. But the article the you can use with singular, plural, countable, uncountable, it doesn't matter. You can use it with any typical noun if it's something that we know about or if it is something unique. So, for example, I went to the supermarket near my house. Specific supermarket near where I live. Another example, please close the door. Here, I think you know which door I'm talking about, the door that we have in this room, for example. So, let's move on further to our second second page of rules here. As I'm explaining all of this, if anybody has any questions, if anything is not clear, I'm happy to answer any questions that you have. You can write them into the chat. I've got the chat open on my side. You can write in English, można ukraińskою, and I'll be happy to answer any as you prefer. Now, the next thing I want to explain is a very typical misunderstanding, and very often at lower levels, students are often told that the first time we talk about something, we use a or an. And this is not true. This is not correct. The difference is that we use a and an if you want to give new information, and if it is not new information, we should use the article the. And if we just go back for a second to the previous slide, and if we look at the last sentence again, please close the door, this is the first time I'm talking about it, but I still use the article the. Why? Because I don't think this is new information. I think you know which door I'm talking about. And so for that reason, we use the article the. And we have here a couple of sentences with examples. A car stopped near my house. The car was blue. So first, a car stopped near my house. This is new information. The car was blue. Now we know which car we're talking about. It's not new information, so we use the article the. In addition to this, a and an can also mean one, but when there is no contrast with any other numbers. So when there is a contrast with 2 and 3, we must use the word one, and we cannot use a and an in this situation. So for example, we've got here, we went to Odessa for a week. So here we have got no contrast, it's just one as it is. But when there is a contrast with 2 and 3, we must use one. So did you go to Odessa for 1 week or 2? Now we have a contrast. Now we have two things. And so here we need to use 1 or 2. But in the first sentence, there is no contrast, so we just say a week. So, we're now going to do a practice task, or you are going to do a practice task. So here we have got 8 sentences. I would like you to take about 3 or 4 minutes to look at these sentences and to try and complete the spaces using the words a, an, or the. So 3 or 4 minutes to have a look, and then we can discuss, but a few moments first for you to have a think, and then we'll see what we have in a few minutes. Це дуже цікава розмова в чаті. Да, я native speaker, я з Англії, але я мешкаю в Україні вже 12 років, тому я не можу казати, що я вільно розмовляю українською, але англійська – це моя рідна мова. Але я не з Ліверпуля, я народився у графстві Йоркшир, тому не саме з Ліверпуля. Але так, я native speaker, я носію мови англійської. Так, ось так. Але гарна вимова майже як у native. Ну, я дуже радий чути, що це майже як у native. So while you're doing these tasks, if you do have any other questions about what I've explained or anything else, please feel free to ask any questions. I'll be happy to answer them while you're practicing these tasks. Two minutes, everybody. And yes, if you want to write your answers in the chat, as Milena is doing, it will be interesting for me to see what you think before I explain the correct choices. But about another 90 seconds before we start checking. I think my native accent is the same as it always is. I don't think it's changed too much from where I'm from when I was born. Obviously, I try to speak with a neutral accent, but I don't use. I speak with the accent that I have, but I don't use any dialect or anything like this when I'm speaking. So, a question from Maria: that is used for inanimate objects like sky, library. With sky, we usually use the article the because the sky is unique. There is only one sky, so we usually use the. But with library, it depends on the situation, because if it doesn't matter which library, then we use the article a. So for example, we can say, I'd like to work in a library. Будь-який, це неважливо, тому вживаємо a. But if we say, for example, the library next to the church, I don't know, has closed down. Here we are talking about a specific library. I think you know which library I'm talking about, and so we use the article the in this case. But like with sky, everybody knows the sky, it's unique, so we use the article the. But with things like library, it depends on the situation. Okay, so let me now give you the correct answers, and we'll go through these. I will explain the reasons why for everything, and if you have any questions, I'll be happy to answer them. You can write them in the chat, and I'll be happy to answer any questions that we have. So for number 1, here we should have I'm a student, article a. Here, you can think of this as new information. but we can also consider the fact that when we talk about jobs and professions and we consider student in the same idea, then we usually use a and an with jobs, professions, students, etc. So the article a is the right choice here. Then number 2, I'd like to work in an art gallery in London. Here we are not being specific. We don't know which art gallery, and in London there are many, many art galleries, and so here we should use an. If someone said a specific art gallery, so if they said, for example, National Portrait Gallery, which is a famous gallery in London, then you would use the, because now it's a specific gallery. But here it's just any art gallery. We don't know which one. It's not specific, so we use the article an. Then number 3, I'm working on a project about Japanese art at the moment. This is new information for the person who you are speaking to, because this is why you're saying the sentence, like, what are you doing now? I'm working on a project. It's new information to the speaker, to the listener, sorry. And so here we should use the article a, because we don't know about this project. Number 4, here you can use both a and the, but the best choice I think is the, because if you spend a lot of time there, then usually you are referring now to a specific library. And usually with buildings like this, the person who you're talking to knows which library you're talking about. Like if you are at a university, for example, you would say, I spend a lot of time in the library, because you mean the university library. It's clear from the context which one you're talking about. If it's not clear and you don't want to be specific, then you can use a here, but the is definitely more typical and more usual in this situation. Number 5, at lunchtime I like having a sandwich in the park. So here we have got any sandwich. It's a non-specific sandwich. It changes every day, so we use the article a. It's non-specific. Number 6, here we need to use the twice. I lie on the ground and look up at the sky. So we have the ground, which is very general. Everyone knows about the ground. The sky, exactly the same. It's unique, so we should use the article the. Number 7, I live in a small village just outside Leeds. Here we are not being specific. We don't know which village. It's not specific, it's not precise. So we use the article a because we don't know which one. And then number 8, here we should use a and then the. There are some woods and a lake near my village. My favourite place is the lake. In the first sentence, telling us about the woods and the lake is new information to us, so we use a. And then my favourite place is the lake, because now we know which lake we are talking about. It's the lake I mentioned in the first sentence, and so we use the article the. So does anybody have any questions at this stage before we continue? I'll give you a few seconds just to think, just in case anybody has anything they want to ask about. Okay, doesn't look like I've got any questions, so I think we can now move forward. But again, if there are any questions as we go forward, please feel free to put them into the chat. I'll be happy to answer any questions about this as we continue. So now we're going to have a look at articles when we want to talk in general. And articles when we have a general meaning, the rules are a little bit different to what we talked about before. So the first rule that we have is if we want to talk about a plural noun or uncountable noun in general, then we don't use an article, we use nothing. So for example, I like cats, cats is plural, I'm talking about cats in general, so no article. Education is important. Again, education here is an uncountable noun. I'm talking about education in general, so again, no article is needed. It's also possible to use a and an with a singular noun, and here we can also mean in general. So if we say, for example, a doctor earns a lot of money, here we mean all doctors. We're talking about doctors in general in this sentence. So if we want to refer to in general, if it's plural or uncountable, we have no article. And if it's a singular noun, we can use a or an to refer to in general as well. Now, this next part is where things start to get a bit interesting, because with certain categories of words, with specific categories, it is also possible to use the article the to mean in general. Now, usually in English, when we use the article the, we are talking about something specific. We want to refer to something exact, some specific example, but not always. And with this category that we're going to look at here, these are when we can use the article the, but it will still mean in general. So the first category is if we have plural nationality words, then we can use the article the. So the Americans, the Germans, the French, the Spanish, all of these we use with these plural nationality words. We can use the to refer in general. We can also use the with an adjective. And if we have, for example, the rich, the unemployed, the poor, here we are referring to people in this concept. So if we say the rich, this is rich people. The poor, poor people. The unemployed, unemployed people, and so on. All of these we can use with a general meaning. We can also use the with singular animals. So if an animal is in the singular with the, this can also mean the animal in general. So we have the classic sentence that was always given in 1950s textbooks, the panda is black and white. Here we mean pandas are black and white. The same idea. Then two more, we can also use the with singular inventions. So who invented the computer? Here we mean computers in general. And the last point, the plus musical instruments, we can also use it in the singular. So I've played the piano since I was 6 years old. Now in this situation, we don't just mean one specific piano, but we are referring to the piano as a general instrument. And so here we can use the with the singular form, and then we've got it from here. Are you reading from Raymond Murphy's book? No, I'm not reading from Raymond Murphy's book. I do have his book, but I use a lot of different sources to produce these lessons. It's not just from one place. So we've now got another practice task. So here we have got another short task here, just 3 or 4 minutes for this one. We've got 8 sentences. And here I would like you to try and choose the correct answer using no article or the, based on the rules that we've just been talking about. So I'll give you a few minutes to have a look, and then we'll see what we have as always in a few moments. As always, if you do have any other questions, please feel free to put them into the chat. I'll be happy to answer them. 2 more minutes, everybody. One more minute, everyone. So thank you again for sharing your answers, everybody. But 1 more minute for the last couple to finish up, and then we'll check. Okay, so let's go through these answers together. So I will explain again for all of these, and you can check what you have. Again, if you do have any questions, I'll be happy to answer any if you put them into the chat about any of these answers. So number 1, we should have, I started playing the guitar when I was 9. We can use, well, we almost always use the with musical instruments in the singular. I played the guitar, I played the piano, etc., etc. Number 2, here we should have the king cobra. This is the plus the animal, meaning king cobras in general. And this is the same use of it as we talked about previously. Number 3, here we should have Wilbur and Orville Wright invented the aeroplane. So here, again, now we're talking about an invention, like who invented the computer that we had before. So we use the plus singular with the invention to talk about it in general. Number 4, here we should just have honesty, no article, because we're talking about honesty in general. It's non-specific example. Honesty is an uncountable noun, so we should have nothing in this situation. In number 5, again, we should also have nothing. Are you interested in science? Again, we are talking about science in general. There's nothing specific here, so we don't need to use the article the. Number 6, again, we should use nothing here. Most people enjoy spending time in nature. Nature is an uncountable noun, and here we are talking about nature in general. There's nothing specific here. So once again, we should use nothing in this situation. Number 7, here we should have a journalist has to be able to write well. Here we are using the singular plus noun to talk about it in general, like a doctor earns a lot of money. A journalist has to be able to write well. We're talking about journalists in general in this situation. And finally, number 8, we should have here children. Children today are more independent. Here again, we are talking about children in general. There's nothing specific here, and so no article is needed in this situation. Okay, so does anybody have any questions here? Just give you a few seconds to formulate if anybody has any. Okay, so it doesn't look like there's any questions here, so let's now continue. Let's move forward. So on to our next practice task as we've got here. So here we have got another short text about the Suzuki method, and here I would like you please to try and complete the spaces with a, an, the or no article in each space. So a couple of minutes to have a look at this one, and then we'll check these as well. Two minutes, everybody. One more minute. Okay, so let's go through these together. Let's see what we have. A few things here to talk about, as I can see from our answers. So number one, here we should have no article. This is just music, because music is an uncountable noun. We're talking about music in general. Nothing is needed here, so we should use nothing. Then number two, here we should have taught himself to play the violin. Here we have got the name of a specific musical instrument, like the piano, as we had before. So we use the article the. Three, here we should say an instrument, because here it's not the name of a specific instrument. It's not the violin, the piano, the saxophone. Here we're talking about an instrument in the singular to mean in general. And so here we use the article an because it's not the name of an instrument specifically. So here we use an. Number 4 is like learning to speak a language. Language is a singular countable noun. We can say 1 language, 2 languages, 3 languages, etc. And so here we should use the article a because it doesn't matter which language, any language. So we use a. Number 5, here we should say the very young. Here, young is an adjective, and it's the same idea we had before with the poor, the unemployed, the rich. It's the same concept that we have here. And so because there is no noun, we're using it with an adjective, we should use the article the. And finally, number 6, here we should use no article. Here we should have nothing because we're talking about pupils in general. Pupils is plural, it's an umnožení, and we're talking in general, so no article is needed in this situation. Okay, does anybody have any questions here? Let's give you a few seconds to think if there's anything you would like to ask. Okay, well, seems to be okay. No questions appearing in the chat. So now we are going to go to our final part of theory, which is with not that way, this way, which is with special uses of articles. So we're going to look at the special uses of a, an, the, and no article, and then there will be 2 more practice tasks for you to try before we finish for today. So let's go through this first of all, the special uses with a and an. So first of all, a and an can mean 1 if we have a fraction or if we have a large number. So as a fraction, I'll be there in 1 1/2 hours. We mean 1/2, but we don't say 1/2, we say a half because it's a fraction. Similarly, we have there were 1,000 people at the concert. 1,000 is a large number, so we use the article a. A and an can also mean each or per, and especially with per, it's definitely a good idea to remember this because per, per is a very formal word. It's from Latin. It's not really used in normal everyday English, and so a and an are much more typical in these situations instead of using, instead of each maybe, but certainly instead of per, it's much more usual to use a and an. So for example, we have the grapes are 250 hryvnia a kilo, so for each kilo 250, and the speed limit is 50 kilometers an hour. Here in more formal English we would use per, but in spoken English an is much more typical, much more usual. And in addition to this, a and an is often used with illnesses, but especially those illnesses which are not so serious and you're going to be okay. So for example, I have a cold, I have a headache, I have a stomach ache, all illnesses, but nothing serious, like you're going to be okay. So here we use a and an with non-serious illnesses. Now, if we go forward to the article the has a lot of nuances with it, and in fact I needed 2 pages of my slides to include all of the information here. Now, when we talk about countries, there are very specific situations when we use the article the with countries, and there are many ways that this is explained in grammar books and textbooks, but the way that I choose to explain it, I think, is the easiest to remember. So we use the with countries which are plural, where the name of the country is in the plural, or when there is a political word in the name of the country. So examples of plural countries we have, like as I've written here, the Netherlands, the Philippines, the United States of America, the Seychelles. The name is plural, so we use the article the. And examples of political words like the United Kingdom. Kingdom describes the political system of my country. The Czech Republic. Republic describes the political system in Czechia. So if we have a political word in the name, we also use the article the. Now, again, as I said, this concept is explained in many different ways depending on which grammar book or textbook you read, but in 99.999% of situations, this will give you to the correct choice. There are only really two exceptions to this, but we'll talk about those a little bit later when we look at other countries. So moving to our next point, we also use the article the with many geographical concepts, and more specifically, if we have seas, oceans, rivers, deserts, and mountain ranges, so groups of mountains, we also use the article the. So for example, the Black Sea, the Carpathians or the Carpathian Mountains, the Dnipro if you are talking about the river, the Sahara Desert, the Atlantic Ocean. With these we usually use the article the. The next point, I was kind of debating whether to include this, but I thought it would be a good idea because we also used the article the with newspapers. Now, of course, in Ukraine, it's not very typical for people to buy a newspaper, but in my country, in the United Kingdom, buying a newspaper is very popular. Millions of newspapers are sold every day, and it's still a very popular thing for us for some reason. So if you have the name of a newspaper, we also use the article the. So the Times, the Guardian, the Independent, the New York Post, the Wall Street Journal, we usually use the article the. And final point on this slide is that we also use the article the with hotels, cinemas, theatres, and museums, usually. There are exceptions like everything in English, but in general, if you have one of these types of building, you should use the article the. So like the Hilton, the Odeon, the National Theatre, the Louvre, all examples of these, and so we use the article the with these types of buildings. Now to our second page of using the article the or special uses. Only two here. So we also use the with a surname in the plural when we are talking about more than one member of a family. So for example, we can say, do you know the Kravchenko family? But it's more usual to say, do you know the Kravchenkos? Or the Smiths, or the Joneses, or the Brumfields, if it's my family. You can use the surname with an S, make it plural, and this will mean the family in general. And that's quite a typical way to talk about families in English. We also very typically use the article the when we are talking about media. So we've got here like the theatre, the cinema, the radio. I love going to the cinema every week. I listen to the radio every morning. But the exception to this is TV, television. Usually with television, we don't use an article if we mean the media. So for example, we would say, I listen to the radio every morning, but we say, I watch TV every morning. So no article with TV when we talk about media. If you're talking about the object, then it's a different situation and different question. But when we talk about media, we don't usually use the article the before television, before TV. And now our final two sets of slides before we do our final two practice tasks, which are the special uses of no article. And there's a few things here which might feel obvious or already clear to you, but I thought it would be a good idea to include this information anyway. So if we have the first name of a person, we usually use no article. So for example, we say, is Sasha coming with us? Not the Sasha or a Sasha, just Sasha with nothing else. Going back to geographical points and continuing with the countries that we talked about before, we normally use no article with continents, most countries, which are the countries which are not included from previously, cities, towns and states or oblasts or whatever it might be. So for example, I live in Lutsk, the administrative centre of Volyn Oblast. And as you can see, Lutsk, no article, Volyn, no article. Going back to countries, most countries don't use an article, as we talked about before. You have the rules already for when we use the, but there are two exceptions to the rules which some of you might be interested to know. And the exceptions are the countries of the Gambia and the Vatican. We use the with these countries kind of for historical reasons, but pretty much every other country follows the rules that we've talked about. But the Gambia and the Vatican are two exceptions. I don't know how useful this will be to know, but certainly it's something that's maybe a good idea to know about. Then moving forward to more geographical things. So as we talked about before, with most natural geographical points like rivers, seas, oceans, deserts, we use the article the. However, if we have an individual mountain or if we have a lake, then we don't use an article. So for example, I'm climbing Hoverla tomorrow. Hoverla is one mountain, individual, so we use nothing. But if we have the Carpathians, as we talked about before, it's a group of mountains, and now we do use the article there. Same with lakes, we don't use an article with lakes. So for example, like Svitis in Volynska Oblast, no article if you want to talk about that. Furthermore, if we are talking about streets, squares and parks, we don't usually use an article with these. There are a couple of exceptions as always, but generally speaking we don't use an article. So for example, I live on Oxford Street, which is near Hyde Park. Oxford Street, no article. Hyde Park, no article. And the final point on this slide is if we are talking about shops and restaurants, we don't usually use an article here either. So for example, let's meet at Pozata Chata, shall we? Obviously, Pozata Chata, a wonderful restaurant. And so here we don't use an article with this. So most shops, most restaurants, we don't use an article before these. So moving forward to our final part of theory that we've got here before we do our last practice tasks. We don't use an article when we talk about games, sports, school subjects and languages. So for example, I play chess, I play football, I play basketball, I play tennis. No article with any of these. And another example with school subjects and also languages, can you speak Spanish? I study French. I don't know, I like mathematics. No article before any of these when we have these school subjects, languages, games or sports. Now the next one is quite an interesting point because this is one which in my experience Ukrainian speakers often have a bit of difficulty with. So if we have a meal, breakfast, lunch, dinner, we don't usually use an article. Usually we don't. So for example, what time did you have breakfast this morning? No article before breakfast, before lunch, before dinner. But if there is an adjective, prikmetnik, before breakfast, lunch and dinner, now we need an article. We need something. So we say, I had a big breakfast this morning. We have the word big. Big is an adjective, and so now we need an article. And it's a very small kind of difference, but it's a very important nuance, because if you have the adjective or not, it makes a big difference to the grammatical structure of the sentence. So again, if there is no adjective, we don't use an article, but if there is an adjective, we need an article. And like I said, it's probably a good one to try and remember this, because this is a very typical problematic area for Ukrainians. I hear a lot of mistakes with this, so probably a good one to remember. And the final bit of theory before we do our final two practice tasks, if we are talking about more serious illnesses, then we don't use an article. So if you remember before, if we talk about non-serious illnesses, a cold, a headache, we use the article a, but more serious illnesses, like here, for example, heart disease, diabetes, cancer, here we don't use an article with the more serious ones. So if it's less serious, we usually use a or an, and if it's more serious, we usually use nothing, no article before. Okay, I mean, as I promised at the start, there's a lot of theory here, unfortunately. Articles is a very, very complicated, a very difficult area of language. But we'll do two more practice tasks, and then I'll take any questions before we finish for today. So here we've got a short practice task for practice task number 4. We have here 6 sentences. In each one you have 2 choices, and I would like you to try and choose the correct alternative to complete the sentences. So 2 or 3 minutes for this. As always, you can put your answers into the chat, and if you have any other questions, I'll be happy to answer any that you've got if you'd like to put them in. A couple of minutes to have a look. So 1 more minute, everybody. Yeah, thank you for your answers, Dimitro. Yeah, Odeon, I won't give the correct answer yet, but yeah, I will say Odeon, this is a chain of cinemas in the United Kingdom. It's a popular chain of cinemas. Kind of like multiplex in Ukraine, I guess, is a good equivalent. So yeah, a few more seconds, everyone, and then we'll see what we have. Okay, so let's go. So I will give you the answers as always with an explanation, and if you have any questions or anything is not clear, please feel free to put your questions into the chat. But hopefully everything was okay. So number one, here we should say I didn't go out last week because I had a cold. A cold is a non-serious illness, and with illnesses in general, we don't normally use the article the. As you remember, as I talked about before, if it's non-serious, a and an, and if it's more serious, no article is more typical. Number two, here we have got the Odeon. As I mentioned before, Odeon, it is a cinema. It's a cinema chain in the UK, and yeah, with cinemas we usually use the article the. Number three, yesterday I played tennis for an hour and a half. A half is a fraction, so we use the article a to mean 1/2. Number four, last month I went to the British Museum. So here it's a specific museum that we're referring to. And as we talked about before, with galleries, museums, places like this, we usually use the article the. It's also one other way that you can consider it is also that museum is unique. There's only one British museum, so we use the article the for this too. Number five is exactly the same reason. So here we use the Tower of London. We went to the Tower of London too. Again, it's a unique building. It's also a museum now, so we use the article the here too. And the final one, number six, I spent more than £100 that day. £100 is a large amount of money. What is it? Piacis sort this. I'm not sure now even in hryvnia how much it is, but yeah, it's a lot of money. So we use the article a in this situation, meaning one. As we have here. Okay, so final task, last task I'm going to give you now is I would like you to look at this final one on the page in front of you. We have here a short dialogue, and here I would like you to complete the spaces with a, the, or no article in each space. If you have any questions from the previous task or anything else you want to ask about, please feel free. But yeah, I'll give about 5 minutes to try and complete the spaces here with a, the, or no article. Just to remind everybody as well that we are trying to collect money today for the rehabilitation of Ukrainian soldiers. So if you have learnt something new, if you've got some new information, it's been useful, you can make a donation with the first QR code, same pierwszy QR code, tam napisano wchodzisz, and you can make a donation there. And also in the description of the stream, there is also a posłanie tam na banku. So if you can help, I would greatly appreciate it, and I'm sure they will as well. So thank you very much in advance. 2 more minutes, everybody. One more minute, everyone. Okay, so let me share with you the correct answers, and then we'll see if we've got any final questions before we finish up. So, number 1, we've got here, let's go to that cafe in South Street. No article needed here because it's the name of a street. With almost all streets, we don't use an article. And certainly if you consider streets in Ukraine as well, I can just add here, with streets in Ukraine you will never need to use an article. So if it's like Khreshchatyk in Kyiv, or if it's Deribasovska in Odessa, we don't usually use an article with streets. So yeah, we shouldn't use anything here. Then on to the, sorry, just a second. Sorry, just lost something here in my notes. Okay, there we go. Right, so in the second, so on to number 2, here we should have no article in this case, the one near Pizza Express, because here we are referring to a restaurant, and with restaurants we don't usually use an article. Now, in spoken English, many people here would say near the Pizza Express, and I can't exactly say that it's wrong, because it's a very typical phrase, it's a very typical expression, like, you know, let's meet near the McDonald's, for example. But according to the rules, with most restaurants and shops, we don't use an article, and so yeah, here we should have nothing. Then number 3, my neighbours the Armstrongs. When we use the surname in the plural, we use the to mean the family in general. Number 4, Jamie is a first name, so here we use nothing. I went there with Jamie once. 5, I want to get the Times. Here it's the name of a newspaper, and I gave you this specific example earlier in the notes, so the Times is right here. Number 6, here we should say there are about 1 million different species of animals and plants. Here we're using it to mean 1, but it's a big number, so we can use the article a. Number 7, here we should have on TV, no article. Here we are thinking about TV as media, and although with media we usually use the, as we talked about with theatre, cinema, radio, etc., TV is the exception, and so here we use nothing. And finally, number 8, natural history. Here we should have no article. This is considered like a subject, like history, natural history, and so we don't use an article with this either. So in principle, that's pretty much everything I wanted us to look at today. I mean, the answers seem to be pretty good, so I hope that it's been useful to some level. Does anybody have any final questions about any topics before I finish the stream? Just give you a few seconds to think if there are any. Okay, looks like we're finishing up, so Dmitro. So I'll switch to Ukrainian just before we finish. So, та я дуже вам, я хотів би дуже вам, як хочу сказати, я дуже вам вдячний, коротше, за вашу участь. Я щиро сподіваюся, що це був для вас корисним, щоб ви дізналися щось нове. І так, я бажаю вам мирного вечора. Не забудьте, будь ласка, зробити пожертву, якщо у вас є можливість. Та гарного вам вечора. Дуже вам дякую. Бережіть себе. Слава Україні. До побачення.